Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. It's the one-year anniversary of the terrible floods that not only left devastation in many of Vermont's cities and towns, but decimated a large swath of Western Mass crops after an already tumultuous spring.
We'll look back at the aftermath of the 2023 July floods with Piyush Labsitwaj of Grow Food Northampton, who were right in the midst of the matter as the largest community farm in the Bay State, and Juliana Merullo, who has crafted a longer piece looking at the disaster.
We'll also chat with Bob Checky of E. Checky Farms, whose farms stand in Feeding Hills, definitely felt some of the effects from the excessive rains, and we'll hear how this year is shaking out.
But first, it's Thursday, and that means we'll be getting a federal perspective as well.
Would they silence you on the House floor again?
Yeah, they did. I mean, they didn't go as far as they did last time, but that they tried to. Because I referred to their inherent contempt resolution as stupid, and which is unprecedented. I mean, it's against the rules of the House for me to say you're stupid, but now it's against the rules for me to criticize a resolution as being stupid. This is unprecedented. You know, I think it's coming attractions of what they want to do if they get more power.
Incidentally, those are the same rules of my House, not just the House of Representatives. You can drop the F-bomb and say all sorts of swears.
Yeah.
And you can say something is stupid. You can't call another person stupid, and that's not what you did, according to you.
No, you can see the debate.
That's the power of C-SPAN. You can weed through all of the chatter and find out for yourself. Well, we are speaking once again with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Worcester's own Congressman Jim McGovern, McGoverning with McGovern. Week after week, we have a conversation here, Congressman, and it seems like week after week, the Republicans are imploding with the two-time fight for who would lead their party as Speaker of the House. But your side of the aisle has been in the news quite a bit lately. The last time we spoke was 2 weeks ago, because last Thursday was the 4th of July, and it was the day of the debate, which happened that Thursday night 2 weeks ago. After that debate, panic seemed to set in with many members of the American public and many members of the Democratic Party. At my best count as of late, there have been 9 representatives of the Democratic side of the House of Representatives calling on the president to drop out of the race, including Massachusetts' own Seth Moulton, who incidentally also ran for president. 6 have expressed some concern. Nancy Pelosi gave a not glowing testimonial yesterday that seemed to tilt toward leaving the idea of Biden stepping aside open. Senator Chuck Schumer willing to leave that idea open. Vermont Senator Peter Welch, the first sitting Democratic senator to call for the president to step aside. Congressman Richie Neal just yesterday saying he's riding with Biden, but the McGovern camp has been oddly silent on this issue. Where do you stand on whether or not the president should step aside, given that the polling, especially post-debate, is not looking good for his chances of winning in November?
Yeah. Look, I think the most important thing is to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't get anywhere near the White House. He is the closest thing to a fascist that we have ever had running for president in this country. And I worry about our freedoms. I worry about, the state of the world. I worry about everything if he were to get reelected. Some people should Google Project 2025 and look at what the Republicans want to do. They want to install him as a dictator. So the focus has to be on defeating Donald Trump. And if, after all these family discussions that we're having, and they're continuing, and the NATO summit's going on, and so, I think you will hear a lot more from people post the NATO summit. But I think people have to make a decision whether or not he can win. And if he can't, then he needs to be urged to step aside. This decision ultimately is his. So for all the chatter, he has to make the decision. If he does not take himself out of the running, because he's got the most delegates and he ran in the primaries, then it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get somebody else. If he decides to step aside, then we have to go to plan B and figure out, all right, do we have a mini primary? How does this work? Because we have to vote virtually as delegates on August 7th before our convention, because this Ohio deadline of getting on the ballot is August 8th. So, we can't even wait till our convention to resolve this. It has to be done beforehand. So look, I have concerns. I have conversations later today with people at the White House, but I'm going to keep my powder dry until I think it's the appropriate time to be more public about it. I want to give him the grace and the space to get out on his own if that's what he chooses to do. But I want to figure out, how do we fix this? And I haven't quite figured that out yet.
Is there time to fix this, even if the president were to step aside? You mentioned that August 7th deadline. Is there a way that he could, whomever would be the next nominee from the Democratic side, could get on the ballot in all 50 states in time for the November election? And is it really the president's decision alone? I mean, I think the Biden camp has checked in with the delegates to see if they're still committed, but there's constitutional ways that he could actually be removed from office as president at this point, and Kamala Harris would become president, and then ostensibly the next nominee. There could be something dramatic that happens at the convention in an old-style type of Democratic convention where that is where the nominee was acclaimed rather than a primary throughout all 50 states. What are the options here?
I mean, the convention. I mean, the delegates are going to have to, if he decides to step aside, are going to have to find somebody else. You know, whether it's Kamala Harris or somebody. I mean, that's how it will be decided, and it has to be decided, by August 7th, so that whoever is the nominee can be on all 50 on the ballot in all 50 states. There are issues about the money that has been raised by Biden-Harris. If it wasn't Harris or Biden, do we have a nominee with no money?
Right.
So all those issues need to be figured out. But look, again, I think what has been most frustrating to me is that we have spent all these days talking about Joe Biden and whether he's going to run or whether he's not going to run, and the focus is not on Donald Trump, who, when I watched that debate, again, I thought Joe Biden's performance was terrible, but Donald Trump is a pathological liar. I mean, these people are dangerous. I mean, again, we talked about them Republicans trying to silence me on the House floor yesterday, not for disparaging any person, but for criticizing a piece of legislation. We are one goose step, one swastika away from fascism in this place. And people better pay attention to that, because the stakes in this upcoming election are higher than any other election in my lifetime. This is important stuff, and this is serious stuff. And I get all the attention on Biden right now. This will work out. This will be resolved one way or the other. If he steps aside, we will have a process in place to find somebody else. If he doesn't, we got to do what we can to put him over the finish line, because the alternative is unacceptable.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, McGoverning with McGovern, you mentioned Project 2025, which is something that has been a buzz over the last 2 weeks, but something I'd never heard of before the debate. So its potential, in my kind of skeptical opinion, the Democratic campaign operatives have said, you guys have to all look at this that has been going on behind the scenes. It's a document from the Heritage Foundation that wants to dramatically reshape the U.S. federal government, consolidate executive power, presumably under Donald Trump if he should win the 2024 presidential election. That's why it's called Project 2025. But if you haven't been familiarized with it, proposes things that the entire federal bureaucracy, including independent agencies like the Department of Justice, will be placed under direct presidential control, calling it a unitary executive theory. They'd try to dismantle the Department of Education. They would essentially end programs like food stamps. They would end the civil service exam to place those loyal to the executive into places of power. They would ban pornography. Did you hear that, America? Project 2025 would try to ban pornography, amongst many, many, many other ideas. The former president, Donald Trump, claims to know nothing about this, despite being cited in this document, hundreds of times. Where did this document come from? When did it come across your radar? And why are we only hearing about this Heritage Foundation idea in the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, because a lot of the stuff the Heritage Foundation does, you don't pay attention to, because they're an extreme right-wing think tank. But the reason why this is coming to people's attention is the people who are kind of on the panel who are putting this together are all former members of the Trump administration, including Stephen Miller. And basically, what this says is that they want to create a dictatorship. They want to basically, make Donald Trump, if he's the next president, king. He can do whatever the heck he wants to do. He'll control everything, and there'll be no checks and balances. I mean, this, coupled with what the Supreme Court decided on presidential immunity, again, it is chilling. The president can do anything he or she wants if it's in an official capacity and they cannot be held to account. I mean, they can hire a hitman to kill you, and if it's official, then that's okay. I mean, this is crazy, crazy stuff. But these are crazy, crazy times, and it's also ridiculous and unbelievable that it's hard to even digest that it's something we should be concerned about. But this is real, and the people who are putting this together are all former Trump administration officials who learned about constraints on their power when they were in the first Trump administration, and they want those constraints removed. So, people should Google Project 2025, read about it. And it's, again, another reason why we can't afford to be indifferent or complacent during this campaign. No matter what you think about Joe Biden's current issues, I got to tell you, we have to stop Donald Trump. We have to stop Donald Trump. If we don't, I've said this before in your show, we may not even have another election in 4 years from now. This is serious stuff.
I think for those who are afraid of the rising tide of fascism, even if stopping Donald Trump now would not stop this tidal wave of folks who have gotten behind these concepts like Project 2025. So it seems like the battle may be just over the next few months, but it could be for a great deal of time, especially in light of the Supreme Court decision that you mentioned that gives the president more immunity than I think was perceived before. I'm trying to look at this in the most even-tempered way possible. Growing up as a kid, knowing the very basic rudimentary parts of civics, you would hear that the president can't be held criminally liable for certain things. It seems like the Supreme Court decision goes far beyond what certain things are. Can Congress pass a bill that would limit this presidential immunity? We do supposedly have a system of checks and balances.
Right.
I'm not a legal scholar. I'm not a legislator. But does Congress have the power to specifically draw the lines as to where the president would be immune and where the president would not be immune, given how concerned many people are?
Yeah, we do. But that requires a majority that would do that. And again, I mean, we brought legislation to the floor this week on all kinds of crazy stuff like freedom of for refrigerators and dignity for dishwashers. Ridiculous legislation. I said that we're not Home Depot. We're the House of Representatives. People sometimes forget that. But the bottom line is that those bills were all brought up under completely closed rules. No amendments. No one can offer any amendments. And the Republican House of Representatives is kind of basically giving us coming attractions of the way the Trump administration would behave. No dissent, no discussion, no debate, no deliberation. You just take it. And yeah, Congress can do it, but we need a House of Representatives and a Senate that would schedule it and bring it to the floor and vote on it. And again, if Trump were president, he would obviously veto it. So yeah, we have the ability to put constraints on this stuff, but we need a working majority to do that. We need to win the House and then we need to win the Senate. And elections matter.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts. Congressman, yesterday and today marked the 1-year anniversary of the horrible floods that wiped out so many farms in your district. The lion's share of the flooding in Massachusetts, at least, was in the 413 and in Central Mass, which you also represent. There were many attempts to try to get the federal government to intervene, to declare it a federal emergency, to get FEMA involved, to try to bring some relief to these farmers who lost so much in the floods last year. Later in the show, we'll talk with Grow Food Northampton and look back on last year and talk about what's been going on this year and into the future. But from a federal perspective, it didn't look good last year for the amount of relief that the federal government had to offer to our farmers. Looking forward, is there any glimmer of hope, or even in this particular year, this particular session, what is the federal government doing in light of the fact that we're likely to face more dramatic climatological events like the floods of last year?
I mean, the bottom line is the federal government needs to be doing a hell of a lot more. One of the things we would like to do is be able to pass appropriation bills that recognize the uniqueness and the severity of some of these storms and this flooding that affects farms. By the way, it's not just in rural areas. It's in, I have Leominster in my district as well. We have FEMA deployed there right now. They're getting some aid for individuals, but they're not getting aid for infrastructure, which is very, very expensive. So, climate change is real. Things are happening that nobody could anticipate. And there needs to be a strong federal partnership in this stuff. And I don't think we're going to get an appropriations bill that reflects those views, but we're going to try to make the case and see what we can do.
Let's end our conversation where we began, Congressman. You mentioned that you're leaving this decision up to the Biden family, essentially, if he should stay in the race for president. You're going to, as you said, keep your powder dry until such a time as that decision gets made. It seems like Biden has already made this decision as he continues to double down on saying he's in the race. I mean, you've got some major political players saying he should either step aside or consider stepping aside. You've got one of the architects of the Clinton administration, James Carville, saying that he's definitely going to step aside. It's just a matter of time. If you had to wager, now that Massachusetts is a gambling state, what will happen with President Biden and his decision? Do you have a best guess as to what will happen over these next days and weeks?
Yeah, I think for him to stay, a lot of big questions are going to have to be resolved very, very quickly. I'm not sure they can be. Look, I'm a friend of the president's. I have respect for him. I genuinely have affection for him. I think he's a good, decent human being. But I think the questions that people have revolve around one, which is he up to it? As Pelosi said, is this an episode or is it a condition? And he has a press conference later today. I mean, we'll see him in action, interacting with the press in a way he hasn't been doing a lot of. But look, the focus for me has to be on stopping Donald Trump. Stopping this lurch toward authoritarianism in this country. Again, the stakes have never been higher. So I think if he can't win, then he needs to step aside. And if he can win, he's going to have to show people how he can do that.
My parents asked me when I spoke to them over the weekend, Congressman, if you would want to step forward and run for president if Biden steps aside. And I told them that I know what your go-to answer of usually for this is, but tell our listeners.
Yeah, I'm a McGovern who probably couldn't even carry Massachusetts, so appreciate the vote of confidence. But look, we have a lot of talent in our party, so I'm not worried about if he decides to step aside, not being able to find an alternative. I think that we will do. But he has to resolve these questions that so many people, including all of his friends, myself included, have. And I'm confident that one way or the other, we're going to resolve this in the next few days.
U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts, Congressman Jim McGovern joins us every Thursday. If you've got a question for the Congressman, you can always send it our way, thefab413@nepm.org. Thanks as always, Congressman.
All the best.
On the way, we'll have a look back at the floods of July 2023 with Piyush Labsitwash of Grow Food Northampton and Juliana Merullo, a reporter who created an episode for who works with the podcast Possibly and made an episode about the subject.
But up next, we'll hear about how last year's floods impacted the only fully functioning farm in Feeding Hills, E. Checky Farms.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering Co-op Advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
How come you have a chalkboard back there that says your mom over it?
It says your mom said to stop in. Underneath. I put that out at Mother's Day.
I see. It looks like this is the chalkboard where E. Checky Farm writes all their insults.
Well, we could do that, but it says your mom said to stop in, and we put that out at Mother's Day.
Yeah, the chalkboard now just says, your mom.
I didn't even realize.
Time for another local hero spotlight. Right down the street from Agawam High in Feeding Hills, not far from Six Flags, which I was tempted to pull over and go to their water slide park, to E. Checky Farms. And are you the E of E. Checky, or is that somebody before you?
That was my grandfather.
So this is Feeding Hills. Is Feeding Hills its own town, or is it like Florence to Northampton, where it's like, or Turner's Falls to Montague, where it's a village?
None of that. It has its own zip code, but it's part of Agawam.
Why do they call it Feeding Hills?
Because the cows used to feed in the hills. Used to be more open land than there is now. So.
But now you're feeding Hills at this farm stand, which is a big farm stand. It's glorious. I love it. It's not only got all sorts of farm fresh vegetables, but Khalees, you were excited and ran into the greenhouse.
Yeah, because there's plants, and I like plants, and I don't have any at my cubicle, and I would like some greenery because it's bleak on our floor.
Although at least we have natural light, unlike our other radio station.
That's true.
So this was your grandfather's, he started it?
Yes, 78 years ago.
Your last name sounds Italian. Did he come over from Italy?
As a kid, yes. Family settled in Agawam. He bought this piece of land in 1946. They started under a tree that used to be right there with a table and evolved into what we have now. A lot of changes in town, a lot of changes here. Not as much open space here anymore. Kind of sad, but...
Are you a farm stand that's taking stuff from other farms and presenting it to the Feeding Hills in Agawam, or is there some place where you're growing all this stuff?
I grow most of the vegetables here. I buy in fruit and some other vegetables that we don't grow. But I mean, I try to get like local blueberries, local peaches. I get all local that I can.
Where are you growing all of it?
We farm about 80 acres of different pieces in town.
But all basically somewhere around Agawam?
Yes.
How many farms are there in Agawam besides yours right now?
Like us, I don't think we're one of the last. There's a couple farm stands, but they grow a little bit of stuff. Not as many. There used to be a lot more, but there's dwindling.
Farm stands are often kind of relatively small, but this is a bigger one. But you add the greenhouse over here, and it's like twice the size.
Bigger greenhouse out there she didn't even see yet.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I can see it through the door. The door's open. Y'all not gonna see me. The farm stand itself has really high ceilings and like exposed beams, but there's baskets on all of the beams throughout the farm store. Where are those from?
My mom collected baskets, so a lot of them are from her, and if I see a different one, I pick it up, and some of the other stuff is stuff that was used here.
It's a nice collection.
So I know that you're not the only person in the family involved with the farm. I love the graphics that are always done here, and that's one of your brothers, right?
Yeah, my brother did that for us.
But he's not actively involved with the farm, and then you have another brother that is, correct?
Right, my younger brother, he deals more with the field stuff. I run the packing house and the stand, and he brings the stuff in and I take care of it. Get it ready to go out.
We're speaking with Bob DeCecchi from E. Cecchi Farms at Feeding Hills. Your slogan on your shirt, everything you'd grow if you had 40 acres.
I do think the slogan and what you were saying before, that you're one of the last remaining farms, kind of an endangered species here, and it's ironic that we need food to live, and yet our farms are still dwindling. What have you done that you feel has made it more possible for your farm to keep going?
We grow different things to try to appeal to different people and put out a good product, and the relationships we have with the wholesale people are good ones, and that keeps us going.
What's your breakdown of retail versus wholesale, and who are you wholesaling to?
It all depends on the crop. Corn is mostly all retail. We grow a lot of beans, summer squash, that's mostly wholesale, peppers. A lot of the smaller stuff, melons, cantaloupe is retail. Maybe half, but we deal with a lot with Big Y. They've been really good to us. Geisler's another local supermarket chain we deal with. A couple restaurants, Latitude in West Springfield, Partners in Feeding Hills, two of the main ones.
This is a generational farm and farm store. You're the third generation. Talk about some of like the family legacy and lore that's gone into this, maybe like memories you have from growing up with your parents or whomever involved from the generation before you.
I remember late nights as a kid when my parents were packing peppers till 8, 9 o'clock, because we used to deal with Stop and Shop a lot, truckloads of peppers, and we'd just be around here running around playing while they were working. As we got older, I did a little less playing, a lot more working.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of good memories.
Has it always just been like your immediate family, or like some of your extended family involved in the farm too?
Mainly just immediate family.
Was there ever a time where you thought, like, maybe I'm not going to go into this third generation of the family business? Maybe there's something else I want to go out there and do?
At the time, there wasn't. I went to school. I went to Stockbridge at UMass. I went to DuPage and West Chicago, and I just never really thought of doing something else. I don't think I could have an inside office job all the time.
So I'm curious, with you and your brother grows, you sell. Do you have sympathy when he's not coming through for you and you need product in the store and he's not producing?
He has to deal with Mother Nature, so it's not all on him.
You can't just go give him a noogie out there like a big older brother would do. Make the tomatoes grow fast.
As much as you'd like to, it's not always the case. We're fighting with Mother Nature, and she's a tough force.
Yeah. Speaking of that, this is the 1-year anniversary of those epic floods from last year. Today on the show, we've talked with Congressman Jim McGovern about the legacy of the floods, and we're going to be later in the show talking with Grow Food Northampton. Did that flooding affect you and what you're doing here at E. Cecchi Farms in Feeding Hills?
We weren't flooded, but we were wet, and we did lose a lot of stuff, but not like the people along the river. So, we got hurt, but not that bad.
Bob and I did talk about this previously, and Bob shared with me that they did not apply to receive any funds because they knew other farms had suffered more than them. And that's the kind of sentiment I hear often in the farming community. It's very hard for people to raise their hand and say, help me now, because they know it's always tough.
Has the city of, or the town of Feeding Hills, because they're not technically their own thing, they've been supportive of your farm itself and or encouraging of other people to start doing more agriculture in this city?
Unless you have a way to get into it, I think it's tough to start farming. If you work at a farm and maybe take over one, you could do it that way.
And if the city's not pressuring you to develop some of your parcel, that works out well too.
if they were trying to sell it off for condos, that would be a problem if you wanted to keep making agriculture happen in Agawam. You mentioned your grandfather came over from Italy. My grandfather came over from Italy. But my grandparents grew up in the Boston area, very, very urban and almost no farming. And it's funny for me because when you think about Italian cuisine, it prides itself on fresh from the field, very, very simple. Meanwhile, my grandmother didn't have as easy as access to that, so a lot of like canned tomatoes and things like that you probably didn't experience with your grandfather opening a farm when he came over. Is there anything recipe-wise you remember from Italian culture that sticks out to you that's an important part of your tradition still?
My grandmother, I don't think, had any written recipes. If you asked her, she'll tell you what she put in, but I think sometimes she left stuff out on purpose so it wouldn't come out the same. You know,
She comes over to your house and complains that like this isn't like what I told you.
It isn't right.
She probably knew what was missing too.
Yeah.
But she's the one that you could go over there anytime for lunch and she could whip up lunch for you. It's like pull stuff out of the fridge, you know, even unannounced. You know.
But are there specific things that you loved eating, that you still love eating, that this farm and farm stand has an impact on ingredient-wise?
I miss her pickled beets, her omelets, her cutlets, fried zucchini.
Yeah.
She would bring fried dough over when we were little kids. Wow. You know, make it hot and come over and bring it. So that was always a treat.
Have you always had house plants or ornamental plants in addition to the farm stand?
Yes. The plant business has gotten bigger over the years. The vegetable part too. But we've always done both. My grandmother's house used to be right where the roses are.
Oh, wow.
And so it's no longer there and needed to expand. So
Do you still live on the property here, or?
I live at the other end of the field, so I could walk to work.
You can check on your brother's work in the field to make sure he's doing the right thing out there on the way to the
Shout
stand.
out Mama treating you today.
Yeah, we mentioned we're going in the back room, the packing room now, and you're the third generation here. 78 years, did you say?
Yes.
Is there a fourth generation up and coming?
They seem to have other careers. Sometimes every once in a while you hear someone say they had enough and they go back, but don't know if that will happen.
Right.
Would be nice if it did, but not sure.
You still got a lot of good years left, it looks like. Is there a plan, or not thinking about that quite yet?
Thinking, but not sure what's going to happen.
How long ago did the 40 cents an ear for the corn apply?
Been a while.
There is a sign back here, our own fresh picked butter and sugar corn, 40 cents an ear.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute, I would say.
But that's okay because the price of things increases and we want farms to thrive. So we go and we pay.
Wow, yeah, this is it's deceiving when you come in the farm store. With the farm store, it looks big, but when you come out back here, you realize how much stuff is actually going on.
They're like, it's small and quaint, and then you get outside and you're like, it's not small at all.
Oh yeah, so there's the farm. We can see it all over there. And yeah, you wouldn't know you're in Agawam. All of a sudden more like you're in the valley. And now we're going into a greenhouse, and the noise is the fans. And the fans have just shut off. So these are, oh wow, this is your tomato greenhouse. This is amazing. You can't go to an Italian farm stand and not meet the tomatoes, right?
That's right. Cherry tomatoes, grape tomatoes, regular tomatoes, heirloom tomatoes.
Got a favorite?
I like the pink cherry tomatoes the best.
Does your family have a sauce or gravy that they pride themselves on?
He's not allowed to give you that recipe.
You can just say yes or no. You don't need to give the recipe.
No one's replicated my grandmother's sauce yet. So, I mean, they have the basic recipe, but it's not the same.
I felt the same way trying to cook like my grandmother, and then my aunt told me that my grandmother used Accent, which was MSG, which felt like cheating. But then I was like, you know what though? I'm getting myself some Accent too, and it has been great.
MSG is awesome. A little bit goes a long way.
MSG is your friend.
Also, it's just salt.
Do you do field tomatoes too, or just the greenhouse tomatoes?
Field tomatoes.
Yeah.
And I believe we're picking for the first time today.
Oh, nice.
People wait for those.
This is the first time I think we've seen a vertical system like this with the irrigation running through the bags. This is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, we play right in the bags. There's a drip tape right through the bag.
Kind of ingenious.
Wish I could say I thought of it.
You thought of implementing it, maybe.
Yes. We used to actually, when I was a kid, grow in the ground in the greenhouse. It was a lot harder. This is a lot better.
Especially when you have a real wet season like last year, I bet.
Yeah.
So here we are in July. What is coming to fruition? What's being harvested now over this week and the next few weeks?
We started corn a few days before the 4th. Like I said, field tomatoes are coming out today. Should have a good supply by the weekend. We're picking beans, yellow beans, green beans, Roma beans, pole beans. Next thing would be peppers and eggplant after that. We're picking lettuce now, squash, cucumbers, pickles.
The bounty has arrived.
Yeah, but I always get a little bit sad. Like when I saw the first corn, I was like, uh-oh, this is the beginning of the end of the summer.
A lot of people say that. But I mean, we'll have corn till Columbus Day when we close. So I mean, it's a long season.
You gotta enjoy every moment.
Yeah, there's some people who come in for corn every day.
Yeah.
They realize it's a few months, but it's a long time in between.
Take advantage while you can.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious if you've been able to sell to more people with SNAP being available and now the last couple of years, 5 or 10 years, the HIP program, the Healthy Incentive Program.
I've always had SNAP even before the HIP, but yeah, there's been more of an uptick in that.
That's a fun bike. Sorry.
Somebody just whizzed by on a bike going fast. That looked fun, or trike.
My dad.
That was your dad?
Yep.
Now he just tools around the farm on his bicycle. I love it.
Yep. He does a lot of maintenance for small jobs. He's still tinkering. He's going to be 80 this year, so.
Wow. Good on him. And he was flying on that bike, so yeah, love it. Is that your brother on the tractor way out there?
No, he's actually on his way to Big Y.
Oh, there you go. Making a delivery.
Yep.
Do you ever get to switch roles? Have you ever switched roles?
No, I think we'd both be lost.
I mean, it's so amazing what we're staring at. You know, here we are in Feeding Hills. So few farms are left from our agricultural community. And it is this just beautiful acreage, many acreage.
From which you can see the field for Agawam High.
Is that Agawam High's field over there, or?
No, that's Sacred Heart Church.
Oh. The church has a field?
Baseball fields. They used to have a athletic league. They don't use them so much anymore.
But it looks like Field of Dreams out there with a baseball field in the middle of your farm.
Priests come out from your corn every once in a while asking you to build things.
Yeah.
So we haven't talked much about fruit. You do strawberries. Are there other fruits that you're growing besides sourcing in as much local as you can?
Raspberries, a handful, but strawberries is the main one.
What about melons?
I grow cantaloupes, watermelon, seedless watermelon, yellow watermelon. That's another thing people are waiting for. That's probably another couple weeks away at least.
Something to look forward to. Summer's not over yet.
3 weeks.
But when the eggplant comes, feels like it's over.
No, a lot of people say when Italian prune plums are in, that's when it's over.
Yeah.
An Italian message. It says the summer sleeps with the fishes.
I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart. You broke my heart.
You know, the first crop is asparagus, and a lot of people are sad when it goes, but I'm like, there's another one coming. It's like it's one goes, another one comes. When peas are done, we'll move on to something else.
Mm-hmm. It's a good metaphor for life, I guess.
And the joys of eating locally. The taste is so much better, and it's so clear. And what you give up is not eating it every day for 12 months, but then when you taste it again, it's like, that's what I waited for.
There's the beauty of being able to get tomatoes in the winter if you're growing them in the greenhouse. Like, oh, hey, I still get local tomatoes. That's pretty awesome.
You need tomatoes, for sure.
You do. My partner is wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel sorry for the people that don't like tomatoes.
Like, and I know it means more tomatoes for me, but sometimes at the height of summer, I'm just sort of like, even I can't eat all these tomatoes.
I don't understand it. I will slice a tomato and put your favorite mayo on it and salt and just make it like a tomato sandwich out of tomatoes and mayo.
I've
love
come
it.
around to that sandwich.
Do you say caprese salad or caprese salad?
Capri.
Assimilated. Totally assimilated.
Just like my family did too, yeah. Gabagool.
You gotta get by where you are. Nobody's faulting them.
I wish I learned more Italian from my grandmother, but I didn't learn much.
I remember all the swears.
Everyone.
Balnudata de culla. So easy, I turn my ass and it's done. That's what my grandmother would say all the time. Tu sei pazz. You're crazy. She would also call us a scutch, which I cannot find a perfect Italian word match for whatever that meant in Itanglish. But it's become a very important word to our family. Because we were all scutches and she was gonna get out the ruler.
Bad, I'm taking it.
I mean, it's like a pain in the ass. Yeah.
Yes, scotch. It's like the scotchamenda. In other words, you bother my head.
That's my Nana!
Oh.
Next, Western Mass Agriculture. a year after the floods.
We're joined by Piyush Labsatwar of Grow Food Northampton and Juliana Marullo, and to find out what happened then, what's going on now, and how we move forward.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
NEPM's podcasts are funded by Armbrook Village, offering research-based arts, music, fitness, and lifelong learning programs at their assisted living and Alzheimer's care community in Westfield. armbrookvillage.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, offering solar options, energy security, and solutions for the local community. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
To be honest, I've been planting eggplant several years now, maybe about 10 years. This year was the best crop. As you can see, it just come on the water. It's like after just one night and everything changed. It's just a farmer part of life, you know. Farming is hard. If it's not drought, it's rain. If it's not rain, it's flood. So we can't predict it. And you just have to try next year. You know, I wanted water, but I never want so much. You know, if I didn't know I was getting so much water, I would have built a boat, you know, like Noah.
That is Courtney Whiteley, a farmer at Grow Food Northampton from 1 year ago today.
This week marks the 1-year anniversary of the devastating floods that caused an estimated $15 million in damage in western Mass and areas along the banks of the Connecticut River.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. Right now we're going to look back at the floods of 2023, and we will begin with an email. Hi, Monty. I hope you're doing well. My name is Juliana Marullo, and I am a resident of Western Mass and a recent graduate of Brown University with a degree in food studies. I also have audio experience from interning with Atlantic Public Media and serving as senior reporter for a podcast that airs on the public radio in Rhode Island.
For my senior capstone project, I produced a long-form audio piece looking at the impact of the July floods on western Massachusetts farmers, the recovery efforts, and these farmers' fears moving into the next growing season.
The email continues, the Fabulous 413 was extremely helpful to me as I was researching this piece, and I know that you've continued to help bring awareness to the experiences of farmers. Well, Juliana, flattery will get you everywhere. We welcome Conway native Juliana Marullo to the studio.
But we'll also welcome to the show Piyush Labsatwar, farm and land manager for Grow Food Northampton, where we went to survey the damage a year ago this week. Thank you both for joining us.
Welcome to both of you. Julia, let's start with you. You grew up in Conway and not far from one of the farms that you profile significantly in your podcast piece. Why was this story particularly interesting to you to cover it in such depth?
Totally. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me today. I didn't expect this to happen when I sent that email, but I really appreciate it. So I grew up a few miles away from Conway down dirt roads, or from Natural Roots.
Which is the farm in Conway.
Which is the farm in Conway, run by David Fisher and Maggie Torin. And I've been going there since I was a kid and have always just felt such joy walking into that distribution barn each week. And I think seeing the destruction, I wasn't even in Western Mass last summer, I was on the Cape, but seeing the destruction from afar of those floods and knowing that the rest of their season was basically done 5 weeks into the growing season, it just hit me. And I think after that point, seeing how the community rallied around them and raised so much money so quickly, I wanted to do anything that I could to kind of help elevate their story and share their experience, because I think they've done so much to grow such an awesome community right there in Conway.
You did this story in essentially like Rhode Island, but and I think people were more aware of what the floods did in Vermont. Did you find that in producing this story that people near you had no idea that this had also happened, like basically just further down the river? Totally.
I mean, I think Western Mass isn't on a lot of people's radars in a lot of places as much as we love it here. And so I think, everyone saw the headlines about the flooding in Vermont. But as soon as those headlines are gone, they're replaced by other ones, and then the focus can kind of turn away. So that's why I really did appreciate all the work that you guys were doing throughout the fall to kind of keep the focus on the farmers here in the 413. And not just the farmers, but also the local towns and municipalities that were also dealing with such flooding or such bad flooding. And so I think, there was definitely a challenge to kind of bring attention to what they were going through here in a variety of different ways, like talking to Maggie and David, and then also talking to other farmers who also experienced really bad devastation.
You talked to Bernie Smorowski, who we went to go visit at the beginning of asparagus season there in Hatfield, advocating for across the river asparagus. You also talked to local policymakers like Senator Joe Comerford, like Representative Natalie Blais, who reached out to me to thank me for having you on the show today, to say
She's
what
awesome.
thorough work that you had done on this project. You also talked with the Conway Select Board Chair, Philip Cantor. I think one thing that I forgot about until I listened to your podcast recently was that there were actually 3 floods. I kind of conflated them all in my brain, but a year on, no, there were 3 floods. And here's a clip from that.
This was the first and worst of 3 big floods on natural roots last summer. After the first one, they tried to restore some sense of normalcy to the farm. They brought the equipment back down to the fields. David and the horses pulled the mobile chicken coop back so the chickens could graze on the cover crop. And then, 5 days after the river had jumped its banks the first time, it happened again.
We're back at it, pulling the chickens up to higher ground again and moving the fencing again and pulling equipment out of the field again.
5 more days later, and the third flood was starting to feel like Groundhog Day.
There were some folks from some TV crew from Boston that were, here, and they wanted to do this whole interview and so on. And literally, as they're setting up the camera, my friend drives in and he's like, I just came from downtown Conway. The roads are overflowing. Water's coming your way. And I was like, hang on, I'll be right back. Got back to it with the horses and the cart, and there was this instant replay for the third time, okay, we gotta move the chickens again.
Yeah, I forgot that there were 3 floods too. I just remember how wet it was. Everybody remembers how wet.
Including the farmer in Agawam that we spoke to, who didn't have the flooding but had the wetness. And that is a piece from Deep Water, the podcast by Juliana Marullo, who is an independent reporter who joins us in the studio today. The whole podcast is only available on your Google Drive at the moment, but we may aim to rectify that. Let's also bring into the conversation Piyush Labsetwash, who I spoke to a year ago today at Grow Food Northampton.
My name is Piyush Labsetwash. The farm I work at is called Perennial Farm, which is right by the river. And it's not a commercial farm, it's an experimental farm. So it's interesting because I'm planting only perennials, trees, and a wheat variety which is perennial. So
Wheat, did you say?
Wheat.
Oh, wow.
So usually all the wheat is annual, but the wheat I'm working with is perennial. And the idea for me to work right by the river is that I'm working with things which are more flood resilient. This was their first year, and they were underwater, flowing water for 10 hours, but they seem to have survived the flow. They are bent over because of all the flow of the water, but hopefully they will stand up again. And
Piyush joins us now remotely as a researcher. What did you learn after all of that last year? I talked to you basically the day that it happened. What have you learned in the year since about the kind of crops you're trying to develop?
Monty, thanks for having me. Yeah, so since last year, when all these crops were under the water for, long time, and it has happened 3 times, as you alluded to it before. Thankfully, these plants have survived. They are thriving right now. The perennial wheat is almost 6 feet tall, with the grains almost ready to be harvested. And the pawpaw fruit trees, which are also floodplain trees, they are also doing really well. They are almost 4 to 5 feet. So yeah, I feel my experiment with perennial crops is doing really well.
Do you see, are you trying to develop more crops in this manner, seeing as it just is probably going to get wetter?
Right. So I am not involved in developing new crops right now, but more about how to grow more perennial crops in these situations. My previous experience working in Kansas at the Land Institute was developing these crops, which are perennial grains, which are perennial versions of the grains we are used to, like rice or wheat. But right now I'm growing them in the floodplains to see if these are the ways we can actually farm in a floodplain and still be resilient to floods.
That is Piyush Labsetwash, who is from Grow Food Northampton. We're also speaking with reporter Juliana Marullo. Let's take a quick little break and talk more about the 1-year anniversary of the historic July floods in Western Mass.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Rain, rain on my face.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. A little positive Richie Havens in this flood talk.
Best version of this.
I think so, too. And we're speaking with reporter Juliana Marullo and Piyush Labsetwash from Grow Food Northampton, where we went to go visit the day of the floods last year. Money was a big part of your podcast and a big part of the situation after the floods, how to restore farmers to wholeness. Your podcast gets a lot into the idea of insurance and why that doesn't work out for everyone. It gets into the idea of the governor's fund that popped up within a week, even though it was a private fund that we were a part of helping to talk about, to let people hear about and give them encouragement to donate to. But eventually there was state funding that was there to assist the farmers. And we're going to play a little clip from Bernie Smirowski talking about getting this money that the state allocated after the devastation.
It was the first time that farmers in Massachusetts, and I think in the surrounding area, have received direct cash assistance.
And that's
for
Natalie Blake.
Disasters. I can't emphasize enough what a remarkable thing that happened.
Bernie was one of the beneficiaries.
There was a maximum amount you could get, and that was $350,000, and that's what we got. But our losses were over $1.25 million. We'll never look a gift horse in the mouth. You take what you can get, and we're very appreciative, absolutely. I don't want to say anything negative. They worked hard for us and did what they could.
That is from Deep Water, the podcast by our guest, Juliana Marullo. Khalees, what stood out to you for the podcast was the GoFundMe aspect of things.
Yeah, there was this huge community effort just across the board, not just amongst like government, state government, and not just the public and private sector collaboration that ended up coming out of this, but there were several farms that did GoFundMes. But there were specific like choices that farmers were making to either set those up or not set those up. And I think you encountered some of those choices with the folks that you interviewed. You were talking with Natural Roots, who did set one up, and then Bernie Smirowski, who decided not to for pretty specific reasons. Do you want to talk about like that factor of bringing revenue in to mitigate?
Yeah, totally. And this was something that I think really surprised me as I started doing the research for this project, where I started off thinking I was just going to focus on Natural Roots and kind of the groundswell of community support through the GoFundMe. And then it was after I talked to Margaret Christie over at CISA, actually, and she was talking about how a lot of farmers had to approach things differently, especially ones that didn't have that kind of direct community-facing aspect of their farm operation, like Bernie Smirowski, and that's how I came to speak with him. And I think I think I was also surprised just how well our state legislators did in how quickly they were able to create these funds and pass the supplemental budget and really get funding out to farmers in the form of direct cash assistance. You know, it wasn't loans, but it was really just checks. And I think that was surprising me because I kind of thought that it would take a lot longer, that they wouldn't have been able to do that as quickly or as completely. And yet, after talking to Bernie and when he said, you know, asking for money at all for farmers, like, we're proud people, like, that's hard for us to do. And I think that was really powerful for me. And just seeing that, that money that did come through from the state, even though it was incredible, it still wasn't enough.
Piyush Labsetwash from Grow Food Northampton, you're the farm and land manager there. How instrumental was the state response to the success of Grow Food Northampton in coming out of the flood and starting a new season this year?
I think it was really helpful. First of all, we also had a GoFundMe and we saw a very good response from the community. So we were able to give cash to our farmers. But in addition to that, the state was able to give this fund. And I'm really happy to report that out of 8 farms, 7 of them are coming back to farm with us in spite of the 3 floods last year. So that speaks to the support, which was really meaningful for our farmers.
It's interesting because the narrative that we have been hearing from some state legislators is that no farms closed after the floods. But that's not the case, is what you're saying, that there was a farm that decided not to come back? Was it a direct result of the floods that they decided not to come back at Grow Food Northampton, Piyush?
Yes, actually, unfortunately, this was a result of continuous, like the 3 floods we had. And this farm was particularly in the place where the water comes first. And this was too onerous for a beginner farmer which we had, and it was not, any kind of support is not enough for such a farm to come back.
Piyush, how is Grow Food Northampton doing writ large this season?
So overall, I mean, this year, thankfully, not any rainstorm has been big enough to flood the Mill River. So things are looking great. And we are now trying to encourage farmers to pick up some of the flood resilient land use policies so that they're ready for the floods, which are going to become more common. So we are trying to figure out how we can support them to grow more perennial crops or have more flood resilient infrastructure. And we are doing these and implementing these policies in conversation with the farmers so that they are part of the decision making process. And we have also signed up Grow Food Northampton on this Climate Smart grant, which is being administered by CISA, where the government is helping farmers to pick up climate resilient farming practices. So that would be encouraging.
Very cool.
That is Piyush Labsetwash, the farm and land manager for Grow Food Northampton. We've also been joined by reporter Juliana Marullo, who has a podcast called Deep Water about the historic floods, which we've just cleared with Juliana. The Fabulous 413 will host on our podcast feed. So if you want to hear the whole thing, check the Fabulous 413 podcast feed, and you'll be able to hear it. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Rest in peace, Shelley Duvall.
And our hearts go out to northern Vermont, who are underwater again a year later. Yes. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.